Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, folks, welcome to another great episode of We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only place where you come to learn how to take average apartment buildings and turn them into amazing communities. So I am your host, John Brackett. I have another great guest on the show. Her name is Julia Lindquist, and Julie is out of Chicagoland. So I think this is going to be a really cool conversation because it's going to give us a very unique perspective on what's going on in some of these high density markets throughout the nation. Now, Chicago is a very busy market, one of the largest cities in the United States. So it's going to give us a really unique perspective. But today, I think we're going to talk about something that I think is overlooked in this space, and it's the value of understanding how to create an apartment building that's trending with the requirements of the times, and that is work, play, live. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Julie has a lot of experience with that. She spent 9 years, and she's doing that now as a broker, and then a good balance of that time, roughly around 7 years, she worked in the commercial space, supporting a commercial real estate developer where they were developing not only office buildings, but mixed-use properties and then some apartment buildings as well. So I think this conversation is very timely around some of the challenges that are going on in high-density markets like Chicagoland because of COVID-19. And then the other side of that too is, hey, what are some things that we should be considering based on the trending that we see today to better meet the work, live, play requirements of our tenant base? So, hey, Julie, welcome to the show. And I hope I did a good job of explaining that.
I think you did, John. I'll go with it.
Okay.
I am Julia. I get called Julie all the time,
I appreciate
which is
that.
my aunt's name. So
I know we have a little bit of delay. Okay, we have a tiny delay. So just like we talked about, if for some reason you need to pause, ask me another question, feel free to do that. Okay? Okay, cool. So Julia, let's start with your background. Share with us a little bit about your background, what you're doing currently in Chicago, what markets you work in, and how did you get started in this business?
Great. Yeah. So I'm a real estate agent. I have my broker's license. I've had it for about 9 years now. Done a mix of residential real estate, some 2 to 4 flats, mostly residential. A lot of it's been downtown in the city, which was a really booming market for a while, and will be again. But there's been some slowdown, which I know, John and I, we can talk more about that. And then I also work for a construction company, and we do commercial real estate build-outs. So we do office spaces, we do multi-units, we do higher education, medical office spaces, some industrial manufacturing spaces, and we've done developments too in the past. So I'm trying to get a really well-rounded idea of the whole real estate market in Chicago and surrounding areas. So that's what I do now. I've been able to see a lot, which has been great, and there's so much more to learn in this market.
Okay, cool. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing right now that you think would be worth discussing, right? Because you're seeing a lot, and you're seeing probably some very unique trends because of the type of exposure that you're getting with these properties. So what are some of the trends that you're being exposed to right now that you think would be worthy of sharing?
So regarding apartments, a huge trend I'm seeing, and I think it will continue, is the amenity space. There's now an amenity space company that actually just solely focuses on working with apartments and how to plan their amenity spaces. But I'm finding that, a lot of renters right now are millennials, and they really like to be able to live, work, and play in the same space, especially with their office spaces being shut down currently. And even as they reopen, there's still a ton of work from home going on. So I think that, a really important factor to an apartment building, if you're trying to get more tenants into it, is to have a space for them to work out, have a space for them to work or study. People love pools. they only get used a couple months of the year here. So not sure it's worth it, but people love pools. And then to just provide like a really comfortable community-based living space as well. It's Chicago, if you're looking in Chicago, it's a super social city, really friendly. And I think something that I've found that some of my clients have really enjoyed is an apartment building that hosts, a monthly happy hour, or an apartment building that has yoga classes. Like some of them have a private room where they bring in yoga instructors. Workout spaces in amenity are huge. Even if somebody has a gym membership, they might have like a specialized gym membership to, again, maybe a yoga place or a spin place, but they want to be able to lift weights once in a while. So, I mean, I highly recommend investing in a spot for people to work out in. And I highly recommend investing in good Wi-Fi so that people can work from there. Printing rooms are big. Lounging rooms are big. So I think those are all really important to future generations, because people have gotten so accustomed to having everything close to them and having the comfort of not going too far from home.
Interesting. I really appreciate you sharing that. So, hey, you said a couple things that really stood out. One of them being the importance of having a workspace now as part of the amenity space, which makes sense, right? Because of what's going on right now in our market. But the other that kind of stood out too was a pool, and how much you said people like pools, even though in a market like Chicago, you're only using the pool 3 months out of the year. So do you think that that's a function of just maybe the aesthetic of a pool, or do people actually like swimming in the pool when they can, right? When it gets warm enough to do so? What are your thoughts on that? I'm just really curious about that.
Well, okay. So look at it this way. If you have an apartment building, and it depends on what kind of investor or owner you are, but let's say you own an apartment building, like a lot of times you want it to be like the it place. Like, I want people to know about this place through word of mouth because my place is the cool place to be at. That's how you keep tenants. I mean, again, this is Chicago based. It is such a word of mouth city. A lot of people go to Big Ten schools. They all connect with each other. It's a small world. It's a big city with a small world in it. So a lot of times people are finding out about places through their friends. So having a pool, even if it gets used for 3 months of the year, that makes your place the place to want to go. And another thing about Chicago is that we live it up in summer because we only have so much of it. So it's like summer Fridays are a huge thing here. Yeah, people take off on Fridays a lot. There's tons of golfing on Fridays and pool days on Fridays. So, I mean, people just jam in everything possible in those 3 months of summer. And I'll tell you, even from my own friends, if someone had a pool in their building, like that's where we'd want to be. And then, everyone's trying to figure out a way to get all their friends there. And it's a huge thing here. But I realize it's a higher cost. Yeah, there's more to worry about. So if I had to rate it, I would say, a gym is probably more important. A space to work from is important. And then I would say pool would be third.
Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about the social aspect of this, because that was the third thing that I heard you say that really stood out, is how social Chicago is, right? And so when it comes to apartment buildings and really designing or upgrading amenity space so that that apartment becomes more competitive and you're really converting it into a community that is thriving, that people want to be in, talk a little bit about the social aspect of that and why that's so important to build out a community, an apartment community, where there's a social feel to it and things that can improve the tenant experience, right? From a social viewpoint.
Totally. I mean, your neighbors will make or break it for you anywhere you live. So I think, it's really important to connect everybody so that they can make a better living experience for each other. And then in turn, hey, this is a great building, come live here. And they recruit their friends. I mean, friend recruiting is huge in what I've noticed. So I think that's really important. And I think having a building that shows that it supports its tenants. And one way of doing that is to maybe host a happy hour or a game night or any sort of like participation thing where the building participates. And of course, you're going to have people who aren't going to participate, but you're also going to have people who really enjoy it. I'll also say too, Chicago is a city that, people move to from other places and might not know as many people. So that's a great way for your tenants to meet other people and want to stay there and connect. So, if I think back, I've seen people when they leave their apartment that they've been in for a while, they host like a goodbye apartment party, and the name of your apartment becomes their roommate's hashtag. Like there's things like that where making the place be something that your tenants really love, like, that will carry weight into the future.
Okay, beautiful. So give us some examples of what that should be, right? What are some of the things that we can add to our apartment communities that will enhance the social appeal of that community, so we can get the hashtags and attract other great prospective residents into that community? Definitely.
So I think like a name or a nickname. Those are always, sometimes they're based off the street they're on. Sometimes, there's K1 and K2, building 1, building 2, they have different names that play off each other. So I think like a catchy name or a catchy nickname definitely helps with some brand recognition. Building a brand, I think, is important. Even if you just have one building if you really want it to be strong, it has to have some sort of brand, like a color scheme, a logo, something like that. And if you have one successful building, why not have more? So if you have that brand, you bring that brand into different areas of the city, and you can gain followers. If people like your building, but they want to move to a different part of the city, they'll move into your building in another part of the city. If they have friends in other big cities nearby, like Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Indianapolis, they'll see that recognition, like, hey, I live in that building in Minneapolis. So I think a brand is really important. I think a catchy name is important. And then in terms of like the community building, I think an online forum where people can, pose questions, sell furniture, rent out parking spots. I think that's a good thing to have. Maybe a bulletin board inside the building where people can communicate. Neighborly communication, I think, is important. And then, like I was saying before, just any sort of social event you can think of, or meditation day or yoga day, or we're bringing in this speaker to talk about something, and get people to attend. And I think you could find people who will do stuff for free. People always want to promote their business or their industry. So sure, you can realize the community and have them come in. Like something as simple as if you have a pie shop that's a famous pie shop in your neighborhood, see if the owner will come in and teach a pie making class. And that gives them attention, and it gives your building, your tenants something to attend and do and socialize in. And I don't know, that's some of the things I think would help build a greater apartment community.
Okay, cool. So I really appreciate that, right? And you're right. I like the comment about working with vendors inside of your natural market or your community and bringing them in, because I think there's a lot of value to be had there. And you're right. Oftentimes they will do it for free because they're trying to get the exposure. And if it's a really large apartment building, I can completely see that being the case, where you can actually attract various vendors who can complement your building and also provide resources that are actually very useful to the residents there. So I like that. And we have done that in the past, and we're doing that now as we're going through this pandemic. So I think there's a lot of value in doing that. So if you had to name your top 3, let's do this. If you had to name your top 3 social items that you would incorporate into a building that you think would add value to that, what would they be?
Gym is number 1.
Okay.
Rooftop deck, outdoor space, some sort of shared outdoor space.
Okay.
Even better if there's a pool. And then my 3rd would be just some sort of forum for neighbors to discuss and meet up. Whether they want to, almost like a Facebook group of some sort, sure, if they need help with something, if they want to sell something, if they want to do a book club together. I think those are the top 3 that would be most beneficial to creating cohesiveness within your apartment.
Okay, awesome. I really appreciate the feedback. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question about branding, and then I'm going to ask of you the same thing as it relates to work, play, live, right? The top 3 components there. So in terms of branding, right? What are some things that stand out? So top 3 things that you see very successful apartment communities do from a branding standpoint that you can share with our audience for consideration when branding out their apartment building?
Ooh, that's a good question. So, I mean, the basics are, you know, you want to get a logo. You should hire a team, to be honest, you know, unless you have some marketing skills, but you want to get a logo that sticks. You want to start an Instagram page with some cool photos of your space. A few other things. I mean, good signage outside is really important. That's going to attract people. And then if it's possible, some of these buildings have apps that they use. That would help, you know, that with future tenants, an app, at least, I mean, at the least, please accept online payments for rent. That's the very, very least. But at the best, if you got an app where people can see what they paid for and check that they paid their rent every month and also request maintenance on something, like those are things, I mean, that would be really helpful, but that's at a really, really, you know, an extreme level. But I think just having a catchy name, having a cool logo that stands out, and getting out just some marketing materials, whether it's stickers or, you know, koozies, something like that, just to kind of get your name out there. And then sort of social media account, I would say Instagram, probably the best thing to have right now, maybe Facebook, maybe TikTok. But those would be my top 3.
Okay, awesome. And I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, so I'm going to pivot now and I'm going to get back to work, play, live, right? Because work, play, live is always a topic in apartment buildings. You said something earlier that I thought was really interesting, pretty cool, that you are now seeing more companies out there that strictly specialize in working with developers to help design their work, live, play environments and the outside space. So what are some companies that stand out to you right now?
So there's a company, and this is in Chicago, there's a company called Lula Fit, and they help design amenity spaces.
Lula Fit?
There's a company called,
Did you say Lula Fit? I'm sorry, did you say Lula Fit?
Lula Fit.
Lula Fit. Okay, I thought I heard you say that. All right, what's another one?
Lula.
Okay.
There's another company, and this is actually not as much the marketing stuff, but there's a company that helps bring in tenants. It's called RentGrata. One of my friends started this company a while ago now. And what they'll do is if there are tenants who like living in the building, prospective tenants can reach out to current tenants and ask them honest questions about the building and learn more information on it from somebody who's actually living there and dealing with the landlord and maybe the noise and whatever it is. And then if that tenant rents, the person who lived there who gave them advice gets a discount on their rent. So that's RentGrata. They're doing great with different buildings in Chicago. Those are 2 companies off the top of my head that I think are really contributing to developers and marketing and, you know, to the marketing of buildings and to developers. Other than that, there are just various marketing organizations that I think that you can talk to about building a brand. And if you want to build a story, and who is your audience? Are you near a college town? Is it college kids? Is it, you know, young adults? Is it retirement community? Every neighborhood has an audience, and figuring out who that is and then figuring out how to market to them is really important.
Agreed. So I love what you said about story branding, right? Everybody loves a story, and making your brand a great story, I think will always go further than just different color schemes, right? I mean, people, especially today with how competitive the markets are, people are looking for something that's unique. So when you can tell a great story and back that up with great service and a great experience that aligns with that story, you know, ultimately at that point, you have a really good business and a thriving business. So, you know, what's really interesting, Julia, why don't people talk? Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and then when you have the story, then you streamline how you do things. And that's really important. Streamline how you do things. Streamline the rental process. Streamline the payment process, the maintenance process, engineers, whatever you need. And then you can take this, idea and you can bring it to Milwaukee, to Santa Monica, to Seattle, wherever. So I think streamlining is really important. Getting the kinks out in a market close to you or one that or trust, I think that's important. And once you figure that out, you can take it over, take it across the country.
Okay, awesome. I really appreciate that. So creating success in one market and then you use that to replicate in other markets, right? All right. So as it relates to story branding, because I think that is huge in any business, but for apartment buildings, I think that's becoming more of an opportunity to differentiate yourself and create a competitive advantage, right? So what are some of the top 3 things right now that you're seeing in very well story branded apartment communities? What sticks out in your mind, right? If you were to give someone some guidance as to create a great story brand, what would be the top 3 things that you would have them incorporate into that story to start differentiating themselves in the marketplace?
Well, I think, what do you want this building to feel like? Like when somebody comes home and, this is their home, and it also might be, like I said, where they work, where they play, like what kind of feeling do you want to give? So taking Chicago, for example, there's a building called the Scott, and it has almost like more of like an old romantic style to it. And it attracts a certain type of person who really likes that. It's like deep purple and silvers and golds, and then 2 blocks away, there's a building that's all new. It's they're both new, but this one's got a super modern style. It's sleek, it's marble, it's cool Sputnik type of lights throughout the place. So I think, what's the feeling you want to invoke? Some of these things, they have like this gorgeous artwork throughout, and they have an artist who designs all the artwork throughout the building. And it's a huge selling point to people who enjoy walking into their lobby and seeing, a beautiful piece of artwork on the wall. So I think you really have to dig down into what kind of emotion you want to invoke. And that's important. So that's been a huge selling point for people. They really want to, they want to feel that their space and the space around them is pretty, especially now as more people are living at home. They want to feel like it looks nice, it's cool, it's comfortable, it's warm. So that I think is the most important thing in a brand. And beyond that, I think, just your ability to understand who your market is, aside from like the feeling like if you're in the business district and you're in an area that maybe is where a lot of people go post-college, then you need to have like a really fun vibe. If you're in a quieter area, you want to have things that appeal to the people who might be renting in that space. So I just think understanding the feeling that you want to give to your tenants when they walk in the door, and then understanding what's important to them. Those are all important to the branding and the story you tell.
Okay, beautiful. So here's something that I see a lot in businesses, right? There's this perception around story, okay, or once the operator gets clear on, hey, here's the story that we want to tell. These are the feelings that we want to evoke through the story. So let's make sure that we create a story such that we align the story with these feelings that we want to invoke. And oh, by the way, that we're also able to attract a tenant base that fits that marketplace, right? And so there has to be some alignment there. But here's where I see a lot of stuff fall down, okay, or the story branding is in the execution of the actual service, right? Is creating a customer service experience that can maintain the story. So can you talk a little bit about that? What are some ideas that you've seen or maybe some thoughts that you can share with that, so that, our operators out there and our investors out there, especially our investors that are aligning themselves with great operators, this is a really great point, right? Because when you're qualifying an operator to invest with, the story by which they can tell, right, to execute on the business plan, that stuff matters. Most people don't think it does, but it absolutely matters. So can you talk a little bit about that? How do you make this stick? How do you make the story stick?
Okay. So, well, you talked about customer service, which I think is incredibly important because we're in such a digital age now. So I hope this isn't bad to say, but like there's no room to be a slum landlord. Like people will find out and they're not going to rent from you. And that's the direction that we've been going in for a while because people leave reviews everywhere. People tell their friends. Everything is online. So if it's wrong, you're going to see it on Yelp. So customer service has never been more important than it is now, in my opinion. And I think one thing that, a guy who does apartment developments in Chicago, who I know, he once sent me an article for Ritz-Carlton's customer service training and what they do, what they did at the Ritz-Carlton to train their hotel staff to give people the utmost service. And I thought that was just a really good thing to learn from. It doesn't mean you have to copy that completely. And I know that tenants can be challenging sometimes, but it's really important that, for your own reputation, that you answer requests on time, that you're honest, that you're present if they need you, or you have somebody present if they need you, a building manager and building engineer, and that you take care of issues because it will come back if you don't take care of issues. And especially in today's day and age where people have options, they can go down the street to the other apartment building instead of living in yours, and they can recruit all their friends there too. So that to me is really important. And then, like you said, in terms of the matching the branding with the customer service with what people want, one thing that I probably should have mentioned is, when you buy a building, and I would hope you do this before you buy it, you spend time in the neighborhood you're buying it in. See who the people are, what they like, what stores do they frequent, what stores are busy, what's in restaurants are busy, which ones aren't, and get an understanding of who your audience is, because I could say what I would want, but what I would want might not be what the people in Wicker Park, Chicago would want. So you really need to spend time there and get an idea for your crowd, because the last thing you want is some fancy looking apartment building in a place that prefers, movie posters on the wall, band posters on the wall.
So
obviously I would think that you would do that.
Julie, let's unpack that a little bit, right? Because in what you said, there's a lot of gold in what you just said. Okay, is making sure that you spend time in a community, really understanding what that community wants. Okay, but when you talk about what the community wants from a branding standpoint and a story standpoint, elaborate on that a little bit, because going to a store doesn't necessarily dictate how you should design your apartment building, but it does give you some clues. So can you elaborate on that, maybe expand on that a little bit so that our audience has a better understanding of what that means and how that translates back into the design theme or the brand of an apartment building?
Yes. Okay. So I think like an example of this, and I've never read on how they do it, but from what I know about them, I think this is the right direction. So think about Whole Foods. Whole Foods is in multiple markets, and they're relatively new. I mean, they've been around for a while, but they're not. They haven't been around for 50 years. So they open up in different markets, and even like a Nordstrom, they open up in different markets, and they see who is my audience in this market, and what are they eating, what are they spending, what's appealing to them. Do they want a coffee bar? Do they not want a coffee bar? Those are things, almost, I would even suggest reading case studies on how some other brands do it. Walgreens does this. How does why does Walgreens pick certain products in certain areas? So I definitely recommend doing your research of case studies of areas, of places that are near where you're planning to purchase or where you do own an apartment building. I think that is huge. And I just think you really should spend time there, or if you're utilizing a partner because it's out of state, have your partner spend time there, or take advantage of a local partner there to give you the insider information, because they're living and breathing in that neighborhood anyways. So for me, if I were to buy an apartment building, like I said Wicker Park, Chicago. Wicker Park has a specific aesthetic to it. I personally know what it is because I've been selling and developing in those areas. But I would ask my friends who live in Wicker Park, what do you like? What do you want to see? You can send out Survey Monkeys. You can offer, $5 gift cards if they complete them. You can take people out to a good lunch if they'll give you the time of day. I think that's all really important. And start with the people who live there. And even if you walk into a store, ask the person working at the front desk, ask questions. This is where your income is coming from. You really need to do your research on it.
Yeah. So, hey, I really appreciate that. So let me kind of summarize what you said, okay? Because there truly are a lot of nuggets in what you just described. So, let's use Whole Foods. Whole Foods is a great example, or HEB. Okay. As one of my staff members would say, HEB, but it's HEB. So
what's HEB?
HEB is a grocery store that's really common in the southeast. Okay. But it's pronounced
okay.
HEB, but we have this ongoing internal joke. We had a couple people, when they were doing a market study like you described, they refer to it as HEB. I'm like, you mean HEB?
I would call it HEB too.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Whole Foods, okay? So Whole Foods is a great example because Whole Foods, they build out their entire store and the content of their store to cater to a very specific customer base, right? And so understanding what that customer base looks like, the demographic, will allow us to make better decisions for how we build out our apartment buildings. Right? Okay, perfect. Same thing with that tour that you described, right? Going through various markets and understanding what type of stores or industry that you have there will help us make better decisions for, who our customer base is and how we then market to them, right? Branding, as well as the type of customer service that we need to implement to be able to differentiate ourselves, but make sure that our brand sticks out. So I think those are really great golden nuggets. And so I appreciate you sharing that. So Julia, we're approaching the end of our show. Okay. So I'm going to recap some of the things that you said, because I really think that there's a lot of value in this conversation. So this is the kind of stuff that makes you money that a lot of people don't talk about, right? These little details right here. So with that said, I'm going to recap a couple things, right? So when we started off, we got into the conversation around amenity space, how amenity space is a great opportunity today because of everything going on, right? COVID-19 has changed the landscape for how business is going to be done or is being done now and how it will be done in the future, right? So 3 key areas that you talked about was work, play, live. So creating amenity space that people can have a work, play, live feel inside of that. But more importantly, by doing that, it creates more of a community environment, right? The other component of that was just building out environments, apartment environments and communities rather, that have a social aspect to them. Because today, and I think this is going to become more of a theme even in the future, long term, especially because of what's going on right now. Over time, I think we're social by nature, human beings, right? Are social by nature. We love the social aspect of people for the most part, but environments like Chicago that are very social environments. I'm familiar with a couple of other cities as well that are like that, and submarkets of those cities. I think that's a really important component. So being able to blend the two and then creating a brand that showcases those items, I think are really, really important. And then lastly, what you did, you finished off, which I thought was really good, very smart, very clever. You started talking about the importance of spending time in a community, okay, where you're buying an apartment in, so that you can use that real world time to understand what kind of stores are there, what kind of industry is in those market areas, so that we have a better feel for our customer base. And then we can make sure that we build out or align a brand that fits that customer base. So, hey, all super good tips and I think suggestions. So for that, I want to thank you. Really cool stuff. Appreciate you very much for sharing that. So Julia, what is one question that you have for me that you feel can add value to our audience? And then we're going to ask you to share how people can get in touch with you.
Okay. So my question for you is based off of everything I said, which is such a Midwest Chicago-based market, and I've seen it in Minneapolis and Milwaukee too. So I would say it's at least Midwest. Do you feel the same way in the southern markets? How do you feel about amenity space? What do people need and want there?
Yeah, I think the biggest trend that I'm seeing right now, and I think will only probably become more demand for, is outdoor space. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, if you think about it, when you're in a high density area, right, there's just not a lot of outdoor space. And so when you can create a community where you do have a lot of outdoor space, and that outdoor space is very well designed, it will naturally draw people to that space. And I think there's a lot of aesthetic appeal that outdoor space adds to an apartment building. And that outdoor space is in an area where, because of the appeal of that space, it will also create more of a community feel, right? So outdoor space, I think, is a really, really big one. And the better that outdoor space is designed, especially in high density markets, I think it creates an advantage for those communities. So that's a really big one that I see. And I think that's one that's going to start picking up some speed, over the next couple of years.
I couldn't agree more with you on that. And from a commercial real estate the construction background I have, that's important to office spaces too. Outdoor space, because people want to get out and they want to take a breath, and they want to just, if they're doing everything in one place, especially at apartment buildings right now, live, work, and play, which they like. People don't want to go that far unless they're traveling to like a foreign country. They need a space to just take a break. And we see outdoor space being big, even in the office world too, and greenery. In general, I see a lot of green roofs, and those are popular. Internal, even just the green walls that they make inside. We put one in a commercial kitchen recently. So I totally agree with you on that, especially since you're in a place where the weather is pretty nice all year round.
Yeah, no.
Lucky you. We had snow today.
Hey, well, I see this. I know this has been a trend for maybe the last 3 years, 4 years, but I see it continuing to kind of build momentum and speed. So we'll see. I think that having an area where people can go and get away, and it breaks up the environment, but you're still home. You're just not in the same environment, right? I think that's a really big selling proposition. Yep. So for that, I want to thank you for being on the show and for sharing your. Go ahead.
I have one last final thought, and then I'm done.
Please.
If you own or plan to buy in a metropolitan area, one final thing I will say is that if it's metropolitan, it's likely going to be, a revolving door of age groups, which, you can't steer anybody because of their age, but that tends to be what it is, So it's really important, and I've noticed this in myself, talk to younger people if you can, because they're going to be the future. I look at it from an office perspective. They're the future employees. So what do they want in their office space? What do they want in their living space? So if you have kids or younger nieces and nephews, cousins, whatever it is, in college, ask them, what do they want in a living space? Because they're going to be the people going to the big cities. So again, it depends on where you own. But if it's a metropolitan area, it's worth it to talk to younger people, ask questions, and see what they want, because you could be building something that won't be ready for a year or two, and you're going to get that next generation in, and you want to keep them coming in. So right. That's my final thought.
Right. Hey, I really appreciate that. So Julia, how do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you do and how you do it? What would be the best way for people to reach out to you?
I will give just my personal email, work email. It's Julia, B as in boy, Lindquist @gmail. I have 2 other work emails, but that will get both of them. So Julia, B as in boy, Lindquist @gmail is the best way to get a hold of me. And I'm happy to talk about residential, commercial, construction, investments. I have a lot of connections I can put people in touch with too. So thank you so much, Jen.
You're very welcome. You're very, very welcome. Hey, thanks so much for being on the show. You did a great, and really appreciate all the insights. And I want to wish you continued success. All right.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you. Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.